Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to the presentation Call in the Time of Coronavirus with Matthew Apple and Daniel Mills, and welcome.
Thank you. So hello, thanks for joining us today. As you already said, my name is Daniel Mills and my co-presenter is Matthew Apple. And our presentation is Call in the Time of Coronavirus. So I'll start off by next.
I'm trying to get you up. There we go.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about how we've divided our presentation today. So first, I'm going to give a brief background on why we chose to conduct this research, and then we'll explain our research methods and results. And finally, I'll tell you a little bit about our future plans for other projects. Next. So in this presentation, we're going to discuss the results of our research on how the switch to emergency remote teaching during the pandemic has affected university faculty teaching English courses in terms of their online teaching satisfaction, their motivation, and their lifestyle. As you've probably seen from previous presentations in this conference, many researchers are looking at the effectiveness of ERT or a lot of student perceptions of the experience, but faculty have been largely ignored. And we feel that in order to improve upon ERT and online teaching in the future, we need to have a better understanding of the challenges that faculty are facing right now. And we're hoping that this research is going to be the first step in that direction. Next, and over to Matthew.
As Daniel said, we are interested in how this affects teachers rather than students. We're going to skip the literature review and the analysis methods in the interest of time and cut right to the chase. Here's the research questions. How are teachers affected in terms of online teaching satisfaction, technostress, teaching motivation, and teacher lifestyle? And we did make 3 hypotheses based on our own kind of intuition, our own experience using CALL, and again, on the literature that we're skipping. And we put together a questionnaire, and the questionnaire was distributed via SurveyMonkey in the middle of August, from middle of August to end of August, and it had 2 parts, 3 parts if you include demographic variables. There were 30 Likert category questions. There's 6 variables right there for you. And there were 5 open response questions. Obviously, they were more detailed than that, but I'm just summarizing them for you because they were quite long. And we ended with a request for an interview. Daniel will be talking about that at the end of our presentation. So again, I'm going to be summarizing. We had an awful lot of information for you. Participants, we had 87 teachers at universities up and down Japan. 12 of them are Japanese. The others were non-Japanese. Not all of them were first language speakers of English. It was pretty well balanced across positions, about 1/3 each full-time, tenured, contract, and part-time. Years of teaching experience were also quite varied, ranging from above 40 years experience to 2 or 3 people who had just started teaching this past April. So starting their teaching careers at university during the pandemic. It was a surprise to us that almost half of the full-time teachers were also teaching part-time somewhere else. And the contract teachers, about 2/5 or so, were also teaching somewhere else. So most teachers in this study had to handle multiple university situations. And we'll come back to that, why that was an issue in a minute. On average, they were teaching about 9 courses per week. So that's pretty typical for a full-time contract, and tenured people teach a little bit less, but the maximum was 18 classes. So teachers were really busy during the week. For the settings, most of them were teaching at a 4-year private university. A few were teaching at public universities. The numbers don't add up to 87. As I mentioned, many people were teaching at multiple locations. And because of this, when we asked them what learning management system or course management system they were using, half of them said they were using Manaba or Google Classroom, but most were using either a private university system that was specific just to that university, or there was nothing at all provided. And in that case, they had to rely on up to 80 different websites or software programs. The most commonly mentioned was Zoom, of course, which is what we're using now. A lot were using YouTube and Flipgrid. So here are some of the results. The quantitative stats we're going to present to you just in terms of the overall composite mean score. And there are some open comments to give you some perspective. Basically, teachers were overall satisfied with teaching online. They tended to focus on instructor-student online interaction. Many of them commented that there were some benefits, especially in terms of time saving and efficiency, but there are many drawbacks, especially in terms of health and stress. Statistically speaking, they were satisfied. Even the institutional support statistics were above the mean, but barely at the mean. Many of them expressed their discontent and unhappiness about the perceived lack of institutional support, particularly in English. And here are some comments. I'm not going to read all of them. I'll just give you a little bit of time to read them. Okay, as I said, these are representative. We had 87 teachers in the study, so most of them focused on the lack of kind of rapport. They felt it was difficult to get that sense of teacher-student rapport because they weren't physically meeting students. There was virtually no tech support provided by most universities. If there was support, it was basically an email saying, here's the manual, read it. Okay, and of course, this led to technostress. It wasn't extreme technostress, keeping in mind the survey was conducted online. The links were made available through things like Facebook groups and this sort of thing. So most of the teachers probably were pretty comfortable overall using technology, but they were stressed out because they were unable to separate work life from home life. And they were staring at a computer screen virtually all day long, which led to extreme tiredness. Obviously, this variable correlated most strongly to teacher lifestyle that Daniel's going to talk about in a couple of minutes. Unsurprisingly to us, because we kind of anticipated this based on our own experience, the technostress was not related at all to institutional support because, as I said, there was basically none. And here are some comments about technostress from the teachers. Now, most interestingly to us is, in a sense, it wasn't technostress the teachers were concerned about. It was the return to face-to-face stress, because the universities seem to be sort of yanking them back and forth between online and face-to-face with virtually no preparation. And of course, this affected their teaching motivation. You can see from the quantitative stat at the bottom right, obviously teachers are highly motivated, they're professionals, they're good at their job, they want to improve their teaching. That's what makes them teachers. They were motivated enough to take our survey. But some things were related, some things were not to teaching motivation. Again, no institutional support related at all. So they were completely on their own. But technostress was affecting their motivation. And here are some comments. We didn't specifically ask a question, are you motivated? We asked them how they felt in general about the benefits or drawbacks or beliefs of using call or online long distance teaching in our situation. So here's some comments for you. Okay, so as you can see, there was a wide range of beliefs and motivations expressed to us by the teachers in our study. Many of them wanted some formal training. They wanted more support from the universities. So they were motivated to improve their online teaching in general, but there were some outlying extreme examples. One person in particular thought it was a waste of time. So how did this affect their teacher lifestyle? I'm going to turn this back to Daniel. Daniel?
Okay, So in terms of teaching lifestyle, first of all, I'll draw your attention to the right-hand side of the screen, like Matthew did. This is the overall mean for the total scale, as well as the maximum on the right side. And what we found in terms of individual items was that the lowest mean was associated with, I've been able to maintain a good work-home life balance. The second lowest mean was, I am physically active. And our open-ended responses really correlated with this. The majority of the open responses were related to lifestyle were negative. And one thing that we anticipated was that there would be a relationship between this sort of negative lifestyle change and the teacher's position. So part-time teachers who have less job security and are maybe teaching more classes at different universities using different LMSs are going to have more negative lifestyle change than a tenured professor. The negative comments were mostly related to health, and this is not just physical health. There were comments, of course, related to backaches and eye strain, but there were also mental health concerns. And the positive comments were mostly related to commute. Next. So we can see some of this coming up in the open responses. We have on the left side the positive comments of the commute being very short, having afternoon naps. One comment that was a little unexpected but makes sense was a teacher said that he was saving, his family was saving a lot more money staying at home. So that's always a positive. The negative comments, as I said, focused on not being able to exercise or being locked in a room all day. And then they were working all the time. And I think this is a big issue with the lack of boundaries. We have that anyway with technology, that we can receive emails in the middle of the night and maybe deal with some sort of issue with our classes at any time. But this became even worse when your office is in your home. The biggest change that some people commented on was that the need to create a space in order to work from home. And this was particularly interesting to me because I actually, in addition to doing research on computer-assisted language learning, I also do some research on real estate and technology. And I'd read several articles when this pandemic started that many Japanese people, because of the small area of their apartments, were erecting tents in the apartment or even on the balcony in order to create some boundary between work and life. And I actually have a friend in Tokyo who is a lawyer, works a lot of hours. And when he was working from home, he set up quite a nice tent on his balcony. And it wasn't just to, of course, he has 2 kids, so he needs some quiet time and the ability to do conference calls. But in addition to that, he just really wanted to separate the 2 spaces in his life. So, and then in addition to that, some of my research on real estate has shown that Japanese construction companies are planning to add shared workspaces as an amenity to the new apartments that they're building. And so this kind of shows us that maybe it's not just the pandemic. People have gotten used to, both companies and individuals, to working from home. So that's something we might see more and more of in the future. Okay.
Okay, so we have a bit of time. So I want to finish with some general concerns and comments. They was not really related directly to our research questions, but teachers did give us an awful lot of comments. We couldn't possibly share all of them with you, but we chose some that, again, I think are pretty reflective and representative of how all of us who are trying to cope with the situation feel about it. I think it benefits students who feel uncomfortable. Many people talked about the idea that, well, maybe teaching online is not so bad. People do complain about it, but as one person pointed out, it's not as bad as catching coronavirus. There was actually one teacher who wrote, I would rather get the virus than continue to teach online. And that was our Mr. Waste of Time. But most people felt that maybe this is not too bad. We should try to be a little more open-minded and think maybe this will lead to different types of teaching techniques or different options. maybe more blended learning. No one actually used that term, but maybe blended learning will finally catch on in Japan, hopefully. And a lot of it is going to have to do with how the people higher up react to this. If they realize that teachers really need more support from the institutions, there needs to be some kind of teacher training program for technology, particularly for people who are already teaching, who have been teaching for a long time. And some people, again, mentioned older professors really need some help. We were focusing on language teachers. Please keep that in mind. We didn't ask Senmon people who are teaching content courses to take our survey. I strongly suspect that our results would be very different if we were able to ask other teachers outside the language field. And particularly if we ask them on a paper-based survey, we might get different results. I think finally we should leave you with, most teachers felt this way. Let's try to improve our teaching because we want our students to get better at English. That's really the point of what we're doing. So to summarize, this is what our study indicates for the moment. We're still, again, thinking about what we're doing in the future. Somewhat ambivalent attitudes towards teaching online, generally speaking, positive, but there's still some questions. The lack of preparedness by Japanese colleges and universities, the lack of training is a very big concern. There's a lot of anxiety about changing back from online to face-to-face, and then back online, or maybe a hybrid. This kind of lack of consistent message from on top is very anxiety provoking to teachers. And the university administrators really need to consider teachers as well as students, because the teachers have psychological and physical well-being issues when it comes to teaching online or teaching in person. So for future directions, Daniel and I have already contacted 37 people. Daniel, you want to talk about that a minute?
Yeah, just in general, our next step is to dive deeper into these comments. So a lot of the survey responses have given us a good idea of what are the concerns or things that we maybe should have asked on the survey but didn't think about at the time. So we have asked respondents to come to a follow-up interview, which we're going to conduct via Zoom. And we're hoping that those interview questions will allow us to dive deeper into these subjects, but also to triangulate what we already found out through the quantitative results and open-ended questions. And I mean, I think the one thing I wanted to end on was, while we're researchers, and this is really interesting for us as researchers, both Matt and I are also coordinators in our respective departments for certain courses or the English courses. And for that reason, this is really interesting information for us, not just from a research perspective, but also because we want to help the teachers that are working under us, the part-time teachers especially, that are teaching at so many different universities and using so many different types of technology.
Absolutely.
Okay. Maybe next slide, Matt, for the Q&A.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, I think that I saw some questions come up on the chat that we could address. And of course, we'll give some time for people to ask us questions directly.
Right.
Let me just address one really quickly, because I see the first one was to me. I don't know, are you seeing the chat as well, Matt?
I've got it popped open now, yeah.
Okay, so I saw that someone did say about coping. So in addition to what was causing techno-stress, was there a way that teachers were coping? We didn't directly ask that in our open-ended question. It was more about, what are the things that are causing techno-stress? Off the top of my head, besides exercise and just getting out when they could and separating the spaces, I don't remember any particular ones, but it's something we're definitely going to delve into with the interviews that we're going to conduct. Matt, do you remember if there was any comments that pertain to that?
Not specifically, no. Most teachers are really focused on how they were teaching, what kind of devices they were using, what kind of software they were relying on. They were also talking a lot about how the students were reacting. Some said, students are really, really tired. It's really hard to monitor student work. Giving feedback is incredibly time consuming. but they didn't really talk about how they were coping with stress. The closest we got was people saying basically, you know, I'm not sleeping very well, or I'm not exercising. I'm sitting down all the time. My back is killing me. My eyes are killing me. But maybe that's something that we can, you know, bring up in interviews. We had originally planned to do the interviews in August or September, but we're teachers too, and we also felt the stress and the need to unwind, and then suddenly, you know, to get ready to continue to doing this online. So we decided to postpone the interviews until January and February. And in a way, that's maybe the best thing. We can all take time to reflect. We'll have, you know, distanced our way from the semi-quasi lockdown, or whatever you want to call it. And it gives us more time to take a really deep look at what the teachers have already told us, and then come up some really good questions to ask them. And I think what we wanted to do originally was interview people individually, but with 37 teachers, that's a lot of time. And in a way, again, it might be more, we're thinking of trying to help teachers, not just do research. We think it might be beneficial to interview people in a focus group of 6 people, perhaps, maybe with either one or both of us there, and a couple of part-time teachers, a couple of contract teachers, and a couple of tenure teachers. There really seems to be a lack of communication among different positions, pretending, well, it depends on the university maybe, but we thought that might be helpful for teachers as well as helping our research, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. If anybody would like to unmute their mics and ask a question, we're almost out of time. So I'd like for everyone first to unmute and give a big round of applause for Daniel and Matthew. Thank you. And we have a couple more questions, but if you want to continue the discussion, please go to the room titled SIG and Topic Discussions. The Hangouts room is not available today. So if anyone has another question, please ask. And do you guys want to save the chat? Just click on the 3 little dots next to the file icon at the bottom, and you should have the option to save the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bill, for the link to the SIG and Topic discussion room.
Oh, thank you.
You can just right click and save that.
I do see a lot of, maybe not questions, but a lot of good comments that are in that chat about maybe what I said about one respondents talked about that some high school teachers were renting rooms in business hotels in order to work. Yeah. And
the rooms were less than 3,000 yen a day.
Yeah.
The
still coming out of their pay.
Well, the business hotel wanted to keep in business too.
Yeah.
So a normally 8,000 yen room was going for about 2,500.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did see another comment here, maybe from you as well, about part-time teachers having no access to the school Wi-Fi.
Yeah, at my school, part-time teachers have no access to Wi-Fi, which is outrageous.
That doesn't make any sense. Well, I have to say, you know, we're not really interested in particularly, you know, shaming or blaming any one specific university, but we can praise our own. At least we have Wi-Fi that everyone can use. I have mixed feelings about other aspects, but
is it strong enough for everyone to use it?
That's the issue. You know, these were never intended to be used by all students and faculty at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's something that they were really struggling to maintain. So
yeah, at both institutions where I work, the Wi-Fi just can't handle it. And I have better Wi-Fi at home, but for the place where I'm part-time, I couldn't work from home. I had to be on campus to get paid.
Wow.
Right.
We also had an issue with our university where when we first started, the learning management system couldn't handle the load. So we actually did have to shut down for a few weeks in order to remedy that.
Yeah.
And then get back running again. So that was kind of an interesting situation.
My school had we have Moodle. Moodle couldn't handle it, but they got Google Classrooms and that was able to handle it. So it was okay at one school, but the other school was using Unipa, and that was disaster. Anyway, we're out of time. So thank you again. And I enjoyed it.
Thank you,
And I
everyone.
wish I could continue this discussion, but I'm staying here. So please go
Great.
to the SIG and topic discussion room if you would like to continue this discussion.
Thank
And
you.
I'm stopping the
Okay, thank you.
recording now.